Story 1. It was a summer afternoon, the sun casting long shadows across our small suburban town. The air was thick with the scent of blooming flowers and freshly cut grass. At the end of Maple Street, where the road took a winding turn, stood an old abandoned house that had always fascinated me. It was a place of whispers and childhood dares, a relic of an era long gone. The house was a grand Victorian structure, once the pride of the neighborhood. Its elaborate architecture, with intricate woodwork and ornate detailing, had succumbed to years of neglect. The once vibrant paint had peeled away, revealing the weathered wood beneath. Ivy and creeping vines had claimed much of the exterior, their tendrils wrapping around the wrought iron gate, which hung loosely on its rusted hinges. The front yard was overgrown, chaotic mix of tall grasses, wildflowers, and unkempt shrubs that had swallowed the sidewalk. The house stood as a silent sentinel, its windows dark and vacant, staring out like hollow eyes. My friends and I often dared each other to approach the house to see who could get closest to its decaying facade. The excitement of venturing into the unknown made our hearts race. One summer day, armed with our bravado and a sense of adventure, we found ourselves standing at the foot of the stairs leading up to the front door. I remember the moment vividly. The front door, a heavy, weather-beaten slab of wood, creaked as I pushed it open. The sound seemed to echo through the empty halls, a haunting prelude to what awaited inside. The air was thick with the musty odor of mold and decay, a sharp contrast to the fresh summer breeze outside. The interior of the house was a strange juxtaposition of forgotten grandeur and utter desolation. The once grand foyer was now a shadow of its former self. The walls, adorned with faded wallpaper and cracked plaster, told a story of elegance lost to time. The grand chandelier, once a dazzling centerpiece, now hung precariously from the ceiling, its crystals dulled by layers of dust and cobwebs. Floors, covered in a thick layer of grime and debris, creaked ominously with each step we took. Furniture, draped in white sheets, stood like ghostly apparitions frozen in time. As we explored, I felt a mixture of excitement and unease. The house seemed to hold its breath, as if it were waiting for us to uncover its secret. We made our way through the various rooms, each one more disheveled than the last. The parlor, with its faded velvet drapes and dust-covered piano, felt like a stage frozen in an abandoned play. The kitchen, with its cracked tiles and broken appliances, was a testament to years of neglect. Our exploration led us to the staircase, a grand, winding structure that led to the upper floors. The wooden banisters, once polished and elegant, were now covered in grime. As we ascended, the air grew colder, and the silence deepened, punctuated only by the creaking of the stairs beneath our feet. At the top of the stairs, we found ourselves in the attic. The temperature dropped noticeably as we approached the door, which groaned in protest as I pushed it open. The attic was a chaotic jumble of old trunks, broken furniture, and dusty boxes. Sunlight filtered through a small, grimy window, casting eerie shadows across the cluttered space. Amidst the mess, I spotted a small, leather-bound diary lying on the floor. Its cover was worn and faded, the string binding it frayed. With trembling hands, I picked up the diary, feeling the weight of its age and the gravity of what it might contain. As I flipped through the pages, I discovered a series of handwritten entries. The early entries were mundane, detailing daily activities and observations. But as I read on, the entries became more frantic. The writer spoke of unsettling experiences, shadows moving on their own, whispers in the dark, and a growing sense of dread that seemed to envelop the house. The final entry was a desperate plea for help, written in shaky, almost illegible script. It was dated just days before I was born. The plea was haunting. A cry from someone trapped in their own home, their fear palpable even through the yellowed pages. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I closed the diary and carefully placed it back where I had found it. Leaving the house was a rush of relief and lingering fear. My heart pounded and my mind raced with the unsettling discovery. I told my parents about my adventure, but they dismissed it as the fanciful imagination of a child. Despite their reassurances, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been watching me, but the house held secrets far darker than I could comprehend. Every time I passed by the house afterward, I couldn't help but glance over, half expecting to see those dark windows watching me in return. The mystery of the abandoned house remains unresolved. Ghost story with no clear ending. It stands as a testament to the darkness that can lurk within forgotten places, leaving me to wonder about the fate of the family who once lived there. Story 2. Several years ago, I began working as a janitor at an old theater in the heart of the city. The theater, a majestic yet dilapidated structure, had once been a beacon of cultural life. Its facade, although worn, still bore traces of its former grandeur. The marquee, faded and barely legible, stood as a nostalgic reminder of past glories. The entrance, with its broken glass doors and tattered velvet curtains, felt like a portal to another time. Inside, the theater was a study in faded elegance and decay. The grand lobby, with its tarnished gold trim and broken chandeliers, had lost much of its former splendor. The walls were adorned with faded, peeling wallpaper, and the plush seats, now covered in dust, stood as silent witnesses to the passage of time. The stage, once a canvas for countless performances, was marred by cracks and faded paint, a shadow of its former self. My job was to clean up the remnants of years of neglect and prepare the theater for its long-awaited reopening. The first few nights were uneventful. I spent my time sweeping, dusting, and attempting to restore some semblance of order to the chaotic space. The only sounds were the low hum of the air conditioning and the occasional creak of the old building settling. Soon, strange occurrences began to unsettle me. Objects would move on their own, and I would hear whispers that seemed to drift through the air. At first, I attributed these occurrences to the building settling or my imagination running wild. However, the whispers grew louder, and I began to hear faint footsteps echoing through the empty halls. One evening, while I was sweeping the stage, I heard the distinct sound of someone walking behind me. The noise was unmistakable, yet when I turned around, the stage was empty. The grand piano, its keys silent, stood as the only witness to my confusion. I tried to shake off the feeling of unease and continued my work. The sensation of being watched lingered. Determined to uncover the source of these disturbances, I began asking around. The theater had a storied history, and the rumors about its hauntings were as varied as they were unsettling. Some claimed it was haunted by a performer who had tragically died on stage, while others spoke of a more sinister presence, a woman who had met a violent end. One particularly eerie night, as I worked late into the evening, I saw a figure on stage. She was dressed in an old-fashioned costume, performing a dance that was both haunting and beautiful. Her movements were graceful, yet there was a profound sadness that seemed to pervade the performance. I watched in stunned silence until she vanished, leaving only an almost tangible silence in her wake. Following days were marked by an increasing sense of dread. Strange noises became more frequent, and I often felt a cold presence nearby. Despite my attempts to rationalize these experiences, the feeling of being watched and the unsettling noises were impossible to ignore. Eventually, I decided to leave the theater. The grand reopening went ahead without me. I couldn't bring myself to return to that place. The ghostly performer's presence was something I couldn't shake, and the memory of her sorrowful dance haunted my dreams. Even now, when I pass by the theater, I glance at it, wondering if she is still waiting for her stage to be set once more. It was a late evening, and I was working the night shift at a call center. The office was a cavernous space filled with rows of cubicles, each one housing a desk and a computer. The only sounds were the low hum of the fluorescent lights and the occasional ring of a phone. I had grown accustomed to the monotony of the job, but one night, something unusual happened. I received a call from an unknown number. The voice on the other end was barely audible, almost a whisper. The words were fragmented, but I could make out a plea for help. "Help me. They're coming." Before I could respond, the call disconnected. I assumed it was a wrong number or perhaps a prank, so I dismissed it and continued my work. However, the calls persisted, becoming more frequent and increasingly distressing. Each time, the voice grew more frantic, speaking of being trapped and an impending danger. Determined to trace the number, I sought help from the IT department. To my dismay, the number was disconnected, leaving no trace of the caller's identity or location. My supervisor shrugged it off as a technical glitch or a prank, but the sense of unease remained. Over the next few nights, The calls continued, each one more unsettling than the last. The voice became more desperate, and I began to feel a growing sense of dread. The once mundane task of answering calls had turned into a nightmarish ordeal. I felt as if I were part of something sinister, a bystander to a haunting that I couldn't escape. The strange calls began to affect my sleep and my overall well-being. I became increasingly paranoid, convinced that someone or something was watching me. Despite my best efforts to find a rational explanation, the experiences remained inexplicable and deeply unsettling. Eventually, I left my job at the call center, but the unsettling calls did not stop immediately. The voice continued to haunt my nights, a chilling reminder of the unknown. The mystery of those calls remains unresolved. Dark echo of a terror that seemed to come from nowhere and lingered far longer than I would have liked. Story 4. A few years ago, I moved into a charming apartment complex in a quiet neighborhood. The complex was an old building with character, featuring well-tended gardens and a close-knit community. Most of my neighbors were friendly, and the atmosphere was warm and inviting. However, one neighbor, a man living a few doors down, stood out in a way that unsettled me. He was a middle-aged man with an aloof and reserved demeanor. He often sat on his porch, watching the street with an intensity that made me uneasy. His gaze seemed to follow me whenever I walked by, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he was observing my every move. I tried to dismiss it as my own paranoia, but the sensation didn't go away. The man's watchful presence was a constant source of discomfort. There were days when I would return home to find him standing at his window, his eyes fixed on me as I approached my door. It was as if he knew my schedule better than I did. Despite my attempts to rationalize his behavior, the feeling of being watched grew stronger. One evening, I decided to confront him. I knocked on his door, and when he answered, I inquired if everything was okay. He greeted me with a nervous laugh and assured me that there was no problem. He claimed he was simply enjoying the evening air and observing the world go by. Although his words were reassuring, the unease lingered. The situation took a darker turn one night when I came home to find my apartment door slightly ajar. I was certain I had locked it before leaving. Inside, everything appeared in place, but the oppressive feeling of being watched returned with renewed intensity. I checked all the locks and made sure everything was secure, but the anxiety did not dissipate. Concerned, I spoke to my landlord about the situation. To my horror, I discovered that my neighbor had a history of unsettling behavior. He had been reported for similar activities in the past, and the revelation sent chills down my spine. I felt an urgent need to move. Finding a new place took time. As I packed up my belongings and prepared to leave, a sense of relief mixed with lingering dread. The memory of those watchful eyes peering through my window haunted me, and the thought of my neighbor's unsettling presence remained a dark shadow in my mind. Even now, when I move into a new place, I can't shake the feeling of unease, wondering if there might be another neighbor lurking in the shadows, observing my every move. Story 5. Our group of friends was ecstatic about the weekend getaway we had planned. The Airbnb we had chosen was nestled on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by an expansive forest. The listing promised a tranquil escape from our hectic lives, and we were eager to experience it. As we approached, the house came into view. An elegant, modern structure with large windows that seemed to frame the forest like a painting. David, the owner, met us at the gate. He was in his mid-40s, with a calm and friendly demeanor that instantly put us at ease. He welcomed us warmly and began a tour of the house. Inside, the design was breathtaking. Spacious rooms, high ceilings, and tasteful decor. The open-plan living area led seamlessly to a deck overlooking the forest, and the kitchen was a dream for any cooking enthusiast. David explained how everything worked, handed us the keys, and gave us his contact information. His final words before leaving were oddly enigmatic. "If anything unusual happens, don't hesitate to contact." We all laughed it off as a quirky, overprotective gesture from a well-meaning host and proceeded to unpack and settle in. That night, the house was eerily quiet. We cooked dinner together, enjoyed some drinks, and tried to shake off the growing sense of unease. The atmosphere seemed to change subtly as darkness fell. The temperature dropped noticeably, and an unnatural chill settled in the house. We noticed the sound of the wind outside, which seemed unusually loud, but we attributed it to the forests surrounding us. As we prepared for bed, the quiet was interrupted by strange noises. Soft thuds and creaks came from different parts of the house, but each time we investigated, there was nothing out of place. The sounds grew more frequent as the night progressed, and a sense of being watched began to pervade the house. Despite our efforts to brush it off, sleep was elusive. At around 2 a.m., I was jolted awake by a loud bang. My heart pounded as I looked around, trying to locate the source of the noise. The house seemed unnaturally silent, and I noticed that a door in the hallway was slightly ajar. I went to close it, but found it difficult to move as if something was holding it from the other side. After some effort, I managed to shut it, but the unsettling feeling persisted. When I finally managed to drift back to sleep, I was disturbed by a chilling dream of shadowy figures moving through the house. When I woke up, I checked my phone and found a text from David. The message read, "I hope everything is all right. Sometimes the house has its own way of communicating." I found the message odd, but decided to ignore it. The next day, we decided to explore the surrounding area to distract ourselves from the eerie atmosphere of the house. We visited a nearby lake and a charming little town, but the feeling of unease lingered. Upon our return, the house seemed even colder, and a strange smell, like old books or dampness, pervaded the air. That evening, while we were gathered in the living room, lights flickered and then went out completely. Power seemed to be functioning intermittently, which was unsettling. As we tried to adjust, a shadow appeared on the wall, moving as though it had a life of its own. We were all terrified and huddled together, trying to make sense of what was happening. David arrived at our call, looking concerned. He explained that the house had a history that wasn't included in the listing. The previous owner had been involved in mysterious and tragic events. There were rumors of a restless spirit that roamed the house, seeking closure for unfinished business. David suggested that we investigate certain areas of the house that had been mentioned in the rumors. He led us to a large bookshelf in the study, which, when moved, revealed a hidden door. Inside the room, we found dusty old artifacts and a weathered diary. The diary belonged to the previous owner and detailed a series of strange occurrences and unfulfilled promises. The diary revealed that the spirit was tied to a talisman that had been lost or hidden. According to the entries, the talisman needed to be placed in a specific location within the house, bring peace to the spirit. David guided us through the house, helping us decipher the diary's clues. After hours of searching and solving the diary's riddles, we located the talisman. It was hidden behind a false wall in the basement. Following the instructions, we placed the talisman in the designated spot. As we did, the house seemed to sigh with relief. The cold atmosphere lifted, and the unsettling noises ceased. David expressed his gratitude and explained that by helping the spirit find peace, we had ensured the house would be calm for future guests. We cleaned up and made sure everything was in order before leaving. The experience had been frightening, but it left us with a sense of accomplishment and a deeper appreciation for the history and mystery surrounding old houses. Story 6. When I relocated to the city for a new job, I was thrilled to find a rental house that seemed perfect. Property was a modern gem in a newly developed neighborhood. It had all the amenities I could ask for: spacious rooms, a stylish kitchen, a lush garden, and an indoor pool. The property manager, Susan, was efficient and friendly, quickly handling the paperwork and handing over the keys. The first few days were idyllic. I enjoyed settling into the new space, decorating, and exploring the neighborhood. Everything seemed perfect, but as time went on, I started noticing small anomalies: items misplaced, doors that wouldn't stay shut, and lights that flickered for no apparent reason. I brushed these off as typical quirks of an old house, or maybe just part of adjusting to a new environment. One night, I was jolted awake by a loud noise. It sounded like something heavy had been dropped or moved in the upper part of the house. I checked all the rooms but found nothing out of place. The disturbances continued: footsteps echoing through empty rooms, strange noises from the attic, and a feeling of being watched. One evening, while I was taking a bath, the lights in the bathroom suddenly went out. I was enveloped in darkness, and heard a soft scraping sound, something moving along the tiles. I tried to turn on my phone's flashlight, found nothing when I looked around. I hurried out of the bathroom, my heart racing, but the disturbances did not stop. Concerned, I spoke with some of my neighbors. To my surprise, they shared unsettling stories about the house's past. They told me that years ago, a woman had lived there under tragic circumstances. She had died in what was described as mysterious and unresolved conditions. Her spirit, according to local legend, was said to be restless and sought closure. Intrigued and frightened, I began researching the house's history. I discovered that the woman's death was indeed shrouded in mystery. Her will had never been executed properly, leaving her wishes unfulfilled. The disturbances were believed to be the spirit's way of seeking resolution. Determined to help, I sought assistance from local historians and the neighbors. We uncovered the details of the woman's will and set out to fulfill her last wishes. It was a complex process, involving legal documents and locating specific items mentioned in the will. With the help of the community, we managed to address her requests and ensure that her estate was handled according to her wishes. As we worked on fulfilling the will, the disturbances in the house gradually subsided. The atmosphere became lighter, and the unsettling feeling that had plagued me began to disappear. The house, once a source of fear, now felt peaceful and welcoming. With the resolution of the spirit's unrest, I decided it was time to move on. The experience had been eye-opening and deeply emotional. I had developed a newfound respect for the histories and stories that lay hidden within old homes. As I prepared to leave, I reflected on the journey and the sense of accomplishment that came with helping to bring peace to a troubled spirit. The house, though initially a source of fear, had become a place of resolution and understanding. I left with a story to tell and a deeper appreciation for the interconnectedness of history, mystery, and the spaces we inhabit. Guys, thanks for joining me on this eerie journey through a house with a mysterious past. If you found this story captivating and want more intriguing narratives, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Hit that like button to let us know you enjoyed it, and leave a comment with your thoughts or suggestions, future stories. Share this with anyone who loves a good ghost story.